Hello, dear students. In this presentation, we're going to be talking about this topic, which is nature versus nurture. Um, in this moment, you might have already participated in the debate, right, about these two aspects. Okay, let's remember that nature, we're talking about genes, and the traits, right, that our parents give us. In nurture, we're talking about the environment, right? How these aspects influence to our personality. And this is a quote that I want to share with you. You can pause the video and you can read about this, okay? So now let's start with the topic of this grammar, which is past perfect versus past perfect progressive, okay? We're going to see the differences and we're going to study some examples. So let's start with the first, okay? The past perfect. Let's remember that we can use it to describe a completed event that occurred before another event in the past. How come? Let's study some examples. Look at the picture that I have over there. Maybe most of you may know this movie. It's a very famous movie of Lindsay Lohan, right? In English, we call it The Parent Trap, and in Spanish, Juego de Gemelas, right? So I have here some examples based on this movie. And it says, Annie finally met her sister, Hallie. Remember that they were identical twins. So Hallie had been separated from her sister to live with her father. Okay, so we are using past perfect in this case to talk about that this event, this situation that Hallie had been separated from her sister. This happened before this other event. Annie finally met her sister. We are using simple past. In a moment, we're going to see what's the difference with both tenses, okay? Because it's very important to know. So, in this case, first, Hallie was separated. That is the first event. Annie met Hallie later at the camp. That is the second event. Now, let's look at the following examples with the structure. In affirmative statements, right, we can use subject, right, plus the auxiliary had, plus the past participle of the main verb. For example, Annie and Hallie did not grow up together, right? This is simple past, did not grow up together. Now, the example with the past perfect, they had lived with different families. If you see, most of the time we're gonna need extra information because with the past perfect we are giving like a background. It's like extra information about the other event. So they have lived with different families. Annie and Hallie did not grow up together. This is the reason why. Now, for negative statements, this is the structure. They were living separately, Annie with her mother and Hallie with her father, because their parents had decided to get divorced. So with past perfect, we are giving the reason why this happened, okay? Now, let's continue with the following, okay? I have put here different examples so we can study the meaning and use of this tense, okay? Now, using past perfect with simple past. First of all, we're going to use past perfect to describe an event that occurred before another event in the past, okay, as we said before. For example, Hallie showed that she had learned the secret handshake. In this case, we are saying that she had learned. First, she learned the secret handshake and later she showed it, okay? Now, the twins discovered that their parents had decided to live separately, okay? So here we're talking about two different events, okay? With the simple past, we are talking about the later time, okay? And with the past perfect, we're talking about the earlier time, the first event, okay? Look at this other example. The twins discovered. So this is the later event. Their parents had decided. So their parents decided first to live separately. This is the earlier time. Then, right later, the twins discovered that. That is the later event. Now, remember that we can use the prepositions like before, by, or until to introduce the later time period. For example, Annie hadn't had her ears pierced until Hallie did it for her. Let's remember this scene of the movie, right? That she hadn't had her ears pierced until. So we are introducing the later event with simple past. Hallie did it for her. Now, Nick had arrived to the hotel with Meredith by the time he realized that his ex-wife Elizabeth was there too. So if you see here, right, we can see that um, this happened first, right? So he had arrived, okay? He had arrived. This is the first event. Later, he realized that his ex-wife was in the hotel too. It was a surprise for him. Now, we can use the past perfect to give reasons. This is very important. Or, as I said before, to give background information for the later events. For example, they were surprised to meet again. They hadn't seen each other for years. So the reason that they were surprised is that they hadn't seen each other for years. Okay, we're giving here the reason. Now, in this other example, we are providing the background information. She hadn't seen her daughters before she met them at the hotel. If you see in the picture, she's really surprised to see the two girls over there in front of her. Why? Because we are giving the background. She hadn't seen her daughters before, right? She met them at the hotel. Okay, now let's move on to the following. Now, in order to talk about the order of events, it's very important to know some expressions, okay? We're going to see some examples in a moment. Let's remember that the past perfect is often used with time clauses for events that occur in an earlier time period, right, that take us to a later event. For example, we can use time clauses to show two separate past time periods. We can use the past perfect for an event that occurred in an earlier time. And let's see the time words that we can use to introduce these time clauses. We can use after, as soon as, before, by the time, until, or when. And we have here some examples. Look at the first one. Annie and Hallie had had a little war by the time they found out they were twin sisters. So, which happened first? Well, they had a little war. Remember that they were like enemies, let's say. But then, right, then they realized, they found that they were sisters, okay? So we are introducing the time clause. By the time they did this, the little war had happened, okay? Now, after they had met, they noticed there are many similarities, okay? Remember that they had a little talk in there. So after they had met, they noticed that, okay? And we have the last one. Until they joined their parents' photo, they hadn't seen them together. So in this case, we're saying that they hadn't seen their parents, right? The two girls, one of them knew her mother and the other one knew her father, but not like both of them. So until they joined the picture, when they put together the picture, right, they found out who or how their parents were, okay? Now, let's continue with the following examples, okay? With the words before and after, the order of the events, it's like very clear, right? We can use it And we can use past perfect to emphasize only the earlier time period. So if I say Eric got divorced before he met Meredith, I can also say Eric got divorced before he met Meredith. Okay, so in Meredith, I'm sorry. So in this case, I can use in both tenses simple past, or I can use past perfect and simple past. In this case, just to emphasize the earlier time period, okay? But both examples are correct. Now, in time clauses with the word when, the past perfect usually shows like a good amount of time between the events. For example, when Eric met Meredith, he had already been married with Elizabeth. So, what I mean is that he was married with Elizabeth and then he met Meredith sometime later. Okay, we don't know how much time. Okay, but we're talking about a good amount of time. And finally, we can use as soon as with the past perfect to show that an event happened very soon after another one. And I have here an example. As soon as Elizabeth had seen his ex-husband, very surprised, she knew that everything was a lie, that the girls had lied to her. So in this case, we can use as soon as, or we can also use simple past in both clauses to show that an event happened very soon after the other one. So we can use both, okay? For example, when Elizabeth saw his ex-husband, very surprised, she knew that everything was a lie. So we can use both simple past and simple past, or past perfect plus simple past, okay? Now, let's continue. In this case, we're going to talk about the past perfect progressive, okay? Let's remember that this emphasizes the ongoing nature of a past activity or situation, okay, that take us to a recent past time. For example, living in the city was hard for me at the beginning. I had been living in the countryside for years. So, if you see, I am talking that this event was in progress. I had been living in the countryside for years, but then living in the city was hard for me, and I am giving the reason why. Okay, so I want to talk about the past perfect structure. Okay, in the affirmative, we have here that we can use the auxiliary had plus been, very important, plus the verb in ing form. And I have here an example. Annie had a British accent. Why? Well, because she had been living in London for years. I am giving a reason, okay? Now, for negative statements, I can say that when Elizabeth saw his ex-husband, she hadn't been thinking about meeting him again, right? She hadn't had this in mind, okay? So this action, I can say that it was in progress, okay? Now, let's see the following. Using the past perfect progressive. So when are we going to use the past progressive? Well, we can use it for actions or situations that continue up to an event in the past. It can show a reason or it can give us a background information. For example, Annie and Hallie were ready to meet their parents because they had been thinking about the perfect plan, right? Remember that they had been thinking about that plan for a long period of time, okay? Now, the twins were sent to the isolation cabin because they hadn't been getting along very well. So, if you see, we are giving a reason, we are providing the background information, okay? So, it's important to use simple past together with past perfect progressive so we can have it in context, okay, to give a reason why. Now, we can use it also with verbs like live, play, teach, wear, and work. And the meaning is going to be the same. For example, the twins had lived in different countries before they discovered each other. or the twins had been living in different countries before they discovered each other. And at the end, the meaning is the same for both examples. Okay, so now after that we have been talking about these two tenses, the differences, and that we have already studied some examples, I invite you to continue working and practicing with more exercises, okay? Thank you so much, and see you until the next class. Bye-bye.